Well, hello, my friends. It's Wednesday, and we are back on the live stream after a brief break. For those of you who were missing these Wednesdays, I apologize, but I missed you too. I needed a break and had a good excuse for taking one. I had a happy birthday. I had a visit from family. I was prioritizing things in a particular way. You know why? Because I'm a human being and humans prioritize things in a particular way. We're not all the same as each other. We're not all the same, even within ourselves. Sometimes our priorities shift. And our shifting priorities of needs and motivations is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So before I hop into that, let me just remind you all, if you're watching on Facebook, I love to see who's here. So you can click streamyard.com/Facebook and give permission to show your name. And having said that, we shall remove the instructional banner so I can turn my attention to the comments and say hello. Jay is here. Nice to see you, Jay. Erin, it is a pleasure to have you here live, watching live. Hillary, I am delighted to see you here. Nancy, delighted to see you here. And there are more here as well who have not said hello, but I know you're here and I'm very grateful for it. So, hey, if you're new to the live stream, or maybe our 2-week break has caused you to forget just who I am, let me remind you, I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author. I'm best known for my middle grade books. I have a series of books called The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place, and I also have a standalone middle grade novel called Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale, which I will probably mention at some point in today's talk. And I'm the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own program to train and mentor writers who are ready to level up in their own work by demystifying some of the eternal truths, I want to say. Eternal is a big word, right? But it's not really hyperbole in this case, because the eternal truth is about what makes a good story work. They're no different than the eternal truths of what makes human beings tick, what makes us do the things we do the way we do them, what drives us, what motivates us. So that is at the core of our topic today. And I am going to have an assist from a famous 20th century psychologist. Let me wave to Nancy is here, and so is Jennifer. What a nice full house. So who is this famous 20th century psychologist I speak of? Well, let's dive in and I'll tell you. I'm going to explain some sort of technical psychology stuff, and I'm going to explain it not as a psychologist, but as a storyteller and someone who is, as I know you are, fascinated by storytelling, endlessly curious about what makes a good story, how we writers can use our own humanity and our own curiosity about humanity to write stories that connect with readers, that have the staying power to endure. Think about the stories you love most. I bet some of them have been around for generations and generations and generations. And you have to wonder, what is it that remains so compelling, so relevant about these stories that we still find them nourishing? We still find them inspiring, moving, engaging, consoling. Well, I'm here to tell you that human beings, as complicated as we are also consistent over time. And it seems to me, this is my writer's opinion, that the fundamentals of human nature have stayed pretty constant. And the folks who explore the inner workings of human nature, well, some of them are poets and some of them are philosophers and some of them are novelists, but some of them are psychologists. So why should we not share our insights, right? Why shouldn't we collaborate? So that's my thinking today. We're going to bring in a little psychology, but then we're going to pivot and start using those insights to talk about storytelling, character development, and I'm going to bring in some examples that I think you guys will find interesting and some of them familiar. All right, that is the plan for today. As always, I love having so many of you here live. If you have questions about what I'm talking about or about how some of these things might apply to your own writing, please feel free to post them in the comments. That's why I'm here. This is a conversation. This is live. We're all here participating, and I love when you participate. All right, it's time to unveil my special guest star, Abraham Maslow. Now, if you ever took an intro to psych class, you have heard this name. Abraham Maslow was a 20th century psychologist. Let's see his dates, 1908 to 1970. He was American, although the child of Russian immigrants, if I'm not mistaken. And he became and remains best known for a theory that is kind of casually called the hierarchy of needs, which is so wonderfully sweeping. It's a hierarchy. It's about needs. You know, it's got some gravitas about it. But this theory that we're still talking about so many years later began in a scientific paper that he published in 1943. And he didn't call it the hierarchy of needs. The title of his paper was this. Now listen up. A Theory of Human Motivation. That was the title of the paper in which he started to introduce these ideas. Some years later, in 1954, he expanded on the ideas of this paper and he wrote a book about them. And the title of that book was A Hierarchy of Needs? No, it was Motivation and Personality. Now, notice the word that appears in both the title of the paper and the title of the book that expanded his ideas. Motivation. It was a theory of human motivation, and then it was developed into motivation and personality. Now, those of you who have some background in the thespian arts, and I'm saying hello and looking at you, Terry, I saw that you just snuck in. I'm really glad to see you here. You know that motivation is one of the first things we talk about in the theater when we talk about character, because characters that are invented, that are fictional, right? They're not just collections of attributes. They're not a hair color plus an eye color, right? Plus a height, plus an economic status. They are some entity with a motive. What's my motivation? It's the age-old joke about being an actor. So the word motivation is already giving us a little bit of a clue, right? About how Maslow's work might end up being really juicy for storytellers. All right, so let's go back to Maslow a little bit. And actually, as I talk, this question of why this work is of interest to writers, we're going to return to it when I'm done going over the concepts. But while I'm talking, you keep it in mind. In what ways do the ideas I'm about to touch upon make you think that you could make use of them as writers? Just listen with that particular question in mind, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a slide so that you can see this with me. I'm going to make room for it by taking that down and adding, look, a little bit of a visual aid. So right away, we have this phrase, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I just told you who Abraham Maslow was. Now, so the hierarchy of needs is often depicted in this shape, right? If you're thinking of the food pyramid, I got you right there. It is. It's a pyramid. It feels like a hierarchy, right? There's a base and then there are levels above it until finally it reaches some kind of pinnacle. Now, this already indicates almost, I want to say a value judgment. It's not so much a value judgment as a judgment about relative importance. It's truly a hierarchy, right? Now, Maslow himself did not think that there was that much rigidity in this. So as I talk about them, again, I want you to bear in mind that it's dressed up like a pyramid right now, but it's not got the absolute rigidity of this must happen before this can happen, before this can happen. And we're going to talk about the ways that the dynamism of it as we go through it. So what's at the base of the pyramid? The words physiological and survival label the bottom of the pyramid. What do those words mean? What is this pyramid representing? Well, Maslow is saying that human beings have needs that motivate us. And the base need, the need at the bottom of the pyramid, in a sense, the first one and the most urgent one that must be addressed by all human beings are physiological needs, survival needs. What are survival needs? We need food. We need water. We need air to breathe. That's healthy. That's not toxic, right? We need to be sheltered from the elements. We don't have, unlike my cats who are over here just off camera, we don't have warm furry coats to keep us warm. We need clothing. We need shelter and clothing. We need sleep, right? We have sexual drives. We have stuff that's biological that we simply need to be alive and to stay alive and for the species to survive. Those are physiological and survival needs. Now, you all know what they are. So I think that we can all agree for the moment that everybody has these needs. There's nobody that doesn't have survival needs, right? We've all got them. What's next on the pyramid? It's an interesting word. It's often referred to as safety. Once your survival needs are met, we can start to talk about the idea of safety. Now, when I think about Maslow's concept of safety, I often find it more resonant to think about stability, because having your survival needs met once is good. It's better than not having them met, because if they're not met, you die. But if we have to go every day to get our survival needs met afresh, right, anew, we have no safety. There's no stability in our lives. There's no sense that we can ever let our guard down for a second. We're trapped in this loop of survival all the time. And so when we talk about safety, we're talking about something like predictability, that our world is orderly enough that we're not in survival mode all the time. We have some control over our lives. This is a personal stability, obviously, that we have our basic needs met, but there's social stability as well, right? Maybe you can think of it as the difference between living in a, Mad Max, Wild West, society has broken down, dystopian environment, versus living in a place where the social order is predictable and reliable. There's law and order. We can leave our houses in the morning and come home at night, and our houses are still there. Our lives are safe, relatively safe and stable. So we go from this very basic biological survival level to something that still feels kind of like survival, but at a higher level. It's order and stability and predictability. That's what we mean when we talk about safety. Moving up the pyramid. Are we ready? Love and belongingness. Now, you might say, or someone might say that, well, love is the main thing. Love is the main thing. Belongingness is the most important thing. Families, that our need for connection is paramount. Well, the truth is that our human need for connection is absolutely essential. People do not do well when they don't have it. But the truth is that until we have our basic physiological needs met and some sense of order, it's a little bit hard to put energy into prioritizing relationships. However, they're very, very important. And the quality, not just of relationships and, feeling loved and knowing who your emergency contact is when you go to the doctor, like who you talk to when you're feeling blue, right? Who are you gonna grow old with, all of the things that make us feel like we are part of a community. Who would you call if you were in trouble? If you were sick, would your neighbors bring lasagnas to the door? Like all of these things, being part of a community matter. But belongingness is the emotional quality of that, right? It's not just the practical quality of who's going to bring a tray of food over if I can't take care of myself, but the feeling that I'm worthy of belonging, that I'm part of the world, you know, welcome to the human race. Or do you feel part of the human race? Do you feel part of your community? It's a very powerful need. It's such a powerful need. And I'm sure you all know this, but historically, to be banished, to be ostracized was the worst form of punishment, right? And so we've always known this, that to take someone and to say you're banished, you've been exiled. We have these sort of triggering, powerful words that describe the feeling of being cast out. You don't belong anymore. This gets played out, of course, on a smaller but often excruciatingly painful scale in the middle school lunchroom. Those of you who were kids, which is all of us, or who have raised kids, know what an absolute painful drama it can be to be the in-group and the out-group, right? As young people who are maturing try to sort this out. The reason I bring it up, though, is just that I want you to see that no one has to teach them this. You know, these are human drives. They're not optional. They're things that we muddle through. We have to figure them out. We don't really have a choice to not figure them out. We're compelled to. All right. So after love and belongingness, we climb up the pyramid one more rung, and we get to a category of needs that Maslow calls esteem. This is a really interesting word, right? What is esteem? We have something nowadays that we call self-esteem. It's, do we feel good about ourselves? Do we like ourselves? Do we approve of ourselves? We look in the mirror and we go, I believe in you, as they say in the musical. That kind of inner esteem is important, but it's not the only kind of esteem that humans crave. And again, a cursory reading of the day's newspapers will demonstrate that humans crave social esteem. They want to be thought well of. They want to have good reputations. They want people to be impressed by them, right? They want to be seen in a positive light socially. They jockey for status. They want to have a nicer house than the people next door. Their car still works, but they want the newer model, right? People love to have signs of status. It's, you know, it's, again, this has been with humans as long as there have been humans. So this esteem is, it covers a lot of ground. The types of things that motivate humans. We want to be respected. We want social status. We want to be seen as successful. We want people to find us impressive. Self-esteem is a great thing. And to be proud of having a good reputation in your community is a great thing. So I'm not casting judgment on it. I just want you to see the breadth of the types of things that could be attributed to the human need for esteem. So we've gone now through the bottom 4 levels of the pyramid, right? The physiological survival needs, the need for safety and stability, the need for love and belongingness, sense of connection to others, right? And then this last one is esteem. These are all needs that get called by those in the psychological field deficiency needs. And what that means is that we are motivated by not having them. When we are in a deficiency about any of these things, it creates a need to get it. So that's kind of important. And we're going to return to that idea in a minute. But let me talk now about the top of the pyramid, this 5th pinnacle of the pyramid, which is not a deficiency need. It's a different kind of need. And Maslow calls it self-actualization. So all of a sudden, this feels kind of abstract, right? If we are hungry and we have to go find food, we go hunting or dumpster diving or, you know, whatever we do, we get our needs met, but we can't really call that self-actualization. That's a physiological survival need, and people will do what they must do to survive. Self-actualization is very different. Self-actualization is the drive to feel that we are achieving our full potential. We want to be fully self-actualized. We want to look within ourselves and see all that we're capable of doing, everything that we feel we might have a vision to accomplish, or that we might have an ambition to accomplish in our lives. And we want to feel like we're doing all of that. We want to wring the towel dry, right? While we still have time. We want to achieve our full potential. Now, what might constitute a person's full potential? For many people, it might be raising a family, right? Being a good parent, putting yourself in that role of, I'm making all the sacrifices that a parent makes on behalf of my children so that they can thrive. It's so right away you feel like, oh, there's something about self-actualization that is not really just about the self, is there? There's something about self-actualization that sometimes involves being of service to others, that impulse comes, that we want to be a leader. Maybe we want to play a role in our community, run for political office, start a charity, perform some kind of public service, right? Start a volunteer organization. Maybe there's something that we care about really, really deeply. We're a competitive athlete, perhaps. We want to achieve mastery. Other people might ski for fun. But for us, our self-actualization is that we know that we are potentially the best in the world, and we want to strive for that. It's not a need. Nobody needs to win an Olympic gold medal. But if your sense of yourself includes the possibility that that's within your grasp, and you get to this level of self-actualization, you will be incredibly motivated to pursue it. Why? Because it's the fullness of your capacity is still out there. Artistic pursuits, obviously, are a very clear example. People who have creative impulses, who are filled with ideas, who look at the world and say, I want to write about that. I want to write poetry about that. I want to paint that. That makes me want to make a dance or a sculpture, that they have the creative impulse in them, will invariably feel that they did not achieve their full potential. They didn't fully self-actualize unless they give themselves permission to express their creative energies. So that's an easy one to talk about, right? However, this is not a deficiency need, right? It's a growth need. The lack of self-actualization might not drive most people to make all the sacrifices that it takes to win that gold medal at the Olympics, or take the risks of starting a charity. And I mean, an enormous amount of effort that it takes. You need a very strong level of motivation to do the kinds of things that would help a person self-actualize. And we can get by without it. Some of us can get by without it. So, and I'm going to return to that idea of some of us as well, but it's not a deficiency need. And so what happens, the difference between a deficiency need and a growth need is that because we're motivated by the deficiency, our motivation is extremely high when we're lacking it. When we're lacking food and water, we'll do anything to get it. If we're lacking safety and stability, we'll do anything to get it. If we're lacking love and belongingness, we're going to long for it so much. We're going to do things to get it, and we're going to do things if we want to have achievement in the world. We're going to do things to get that. The more we lack them, the higher our motivation. But get this, as we start to achieve these things, our motivation drops because we're no longer deficient. So somebody who doesn't need to go out hunting and gathering and carrying water home in buckets just to survive is not going to do it. They don't need to. The need has been met. They're no longer deficient. Somebody who has love and belongingness is going to revel in it and be grateful for it, I'm sure, but they're not going to be driven to go out and constantly find new people, right? Unless they have some kind of pathological, insatiable need, right, for human approval, to impress other people. A healthy person is like, I have love and belongingness. I'm no longer craving it. I'm enjoying it. I'm putting my energy toward fulfilling the relationships in my life. Likewise, somebody who's really achieved a lot, unless they're pathologically insatiable about it, they're going to be contented. They're going to like it. They're going to say, oh, wow, I'm feeling good. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I'm respected in my community. My 401k is looking good. This is a wonderful place of contentment to get to. And so you see that the intensity of motivation goes down as the deficiency needs are met. And this is completely logical, right? I'm sure this makes perfect sense to all of you. It's how we experience our lives. Self-actualization is different. It's a growth need. Sometimes they call it like a becoming need, right? We are constantly in a state of becoming. And if we are the kind of person who finds that the self-actualization is really one of our drives, we never get to the end of it. It's not something that we can exhaust. We don't say, oh, today I'm fully self-actualized. Let's take a break. I'm done now. There are no perfect people. We don't get to perfection in our lifetimes. Us mere mortals do not get to it. And so it is a process. It is a continuing embrace of growth. So that's kind of an important distinction. The more we self-actualize, it doesn't necessarily lessen our motivation. It's an ongoing need. All right. Now, before I take this chart down and start to talk about writing, I want to just add some of the nuances that Maslow himself was very careful to explain as he developed his theory over time. So the order of these is not as rigid as the pyramid makes it look. Because why? Because we may go through many different stages in our lives where one of these needs is really deficient and others are not as deficient, right? And so where the deficiency is where our motivation is going to go. So we may find ourselves cycling through which of these needs are sort of driving our life story at different times in our lives. We may feel like we've got all of this going on pretty good, and then something happens, and all of a sudden we're right back to struggling for survival, right? This is the fickleness of fortune sometimes will have us moving back and forth. Somebody may be in a family and a marriage and think that their love and belongingness is solid as a rock, and then we all know that sometimes terrible surprises happen. Marriages end, and that person is then plunged out of love and belongingness being fulfilled and back into deficiency. So it's obvious, I think, to all of you that we can sort of flow in and out of these. It's not like there's an order. It's not that one is achieved and then never needs to be looked at again. So it's not quite like, literally climbing a ladder. Self-actualization, of course, is different, because if it's the way we swing, if self-actualization is one of the things that really makes us run, it's always going to be there and we're never going to get to the end of it. Now, when I say if self-actualization is one of the things that makes us run, what I'm talking about is personality, temperament, whatever word you want to use. Maslow called his book Motivation and Personality. So I can use the word personality. We're all different, aren't we? Some of us incline a little bit one way emotionally, temperamentally, and some of us incline a different way. Some of us are a little bit country. Some of us are a little bit rock and roll, right? You follow my logic. For some people, for example, esteem, social status is really, really important. And it might be so important that they are willing to tolerate a certain amount of deficiency in love and belongingness in order to achieve social status. Someone says, you know what? I don't need personal relationships. I'm gunning for my career. I want to make partner by age 35 or whatever it is. They may make a deal within themselves to say, no, that's more important than this. Some people desperately need safety and stability. Some people's temperaments are very stability oriented. They really can barely function if their lives are too chaotic and unstable. They have a low tolerance for risk. Now, this is temperamental. This is just the way some people are. There's nothing wrong with it. We have people among us who are more tolerant of risk, and we have some who are less tolerant of risk. These are personality types. It's interesting to consider, you know, what we can learn about ourselves from contemplating this work. But hypothetically, a person who really has a very strong inclination toward needing safety, stability, an orderly world is going to very likely have a whole set of beliefs and practices that go along with that. And they may look to their neighbor who's, you know, living out of an RV and doesn't know where they're going to be next week, and just is the spirit of variety and adventure and surprise is what drives that person. And they say they're crazy. And the person who's, you know, living their best life driving around the country in an RV may look at the person who's got everything very orderly and stable and say, you're missing out. You're missing all the fun. Neither one is wrong or right. They're just temperamentally different. They have a different relationship to this particular need. So what constitutes a deficiency for one person may not constitute a deficiency for another, is my point. So there's lots of nuance within here. Now, you are all creative people. That's why you're watching this. And for people who have that quality, self-actualization is almost always on the table. And when it comes into collision with some of these other needs, when we are, for example, as so many people go through, we're young and we have a dream of doing something artistic. It just feels like it's part of who we are. But we know that it's going to be hard to make a living at it. And so our need for self-actualization collides with our physiological survival need. This is a tremendous inner struggle, right? What do? These are not small things. Abraham Maslow was saying these 5 categories of motivation are what make humans tick. They're all built in, and we're all the same with that, you know. Our temperaments may be different. We may prioritize them differently. Our level of deficiency versus sufficiency may be set at different settings, right? But this is what motivates us. And so when these needs collide, you see that we really have a lot of processing to do, and we may feel quite stressed about it. And these may be times of great conflict. What if your need for loving belongingness is really, really strong, right? And your sense of family and stability are strong drives. But then there's an opportunity to gain more esteem by accepting a job in a place where you don't know anybody. You've got to sacrifice your sense of belongingness, right, to top up your need for esteem. These are tough decisions, and this is why they're tough decisions. So now that I've given just a couple of generic examples, I'm sure you could all brainstorm a million ways. You can even see in your own life or the lives of the people that you know how this sense of the hierarchy needs colliding with each other is often at the root of some of the real struggles of our lives. So I'm going to put this away now, since I know you've all had plenty of time to absorb it. And I shall come back. And now let's talk about writing. I hope that while we've been going over this, you've been thinking about the stories that you might be writing, the stories that you know well, the stories that you love. And I can see in the comments already, Jay has given us an example from The Hobbit. So we're going to go through these examples in a minute. My model, my chosen model of story structure, as you all know by now, if you've been watching the channel, is strongly inflected by Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey, which basically tells us that the reason that we write stories, tell stories, share stories, the reason that stories endure is because they depict something essential and recognizable about the process of being human, right? In a sense, they're depicting our journey to self-actualization. Joseph Campbell calls it transformation of consciousness. But a story is a mechanism of change and transformation. And the template, if you will, the familiar rhythms, the energies of the hero's journey bring us toward this constant state of becoming that Maslow calls self-actualization. And because stories are all about change, we need to concern ourselves deeply with this idea of motivation. Because what motivates people to change? What motivates anybody to do anything? Maslow has kind of laid it out for us in a truly elegant and sort of easy to conceptualize fashion. And when we have to develop our stories and we think about why our characters are doing what they're doing, I would put it to you that almost always, I mean, I can't say always because it seems so sweeping, but it really is always. Your characters are motivated by these things. This is what's motivating your characters. They're trying to survive. They're trying to find stability. They're trying to find love and belongingness. They're trying to find esteem. They're trying to self-actualize. It's someplace in there. And it's very likely to be a kind of a constantly dynamic change of what's motivating them at different moments. And the key moments of your storytelling may, in fact, involve these powerful needs colliding, coming into conflict with one another, either internally within your main character or through the depiction of external forces. So this is going to be true not only on the big arc of your storytelling, right? The big journey of transformation, that transformation of consciousness that your hero is going to go through, but it's also going to be true in a very practical way, scene after scene after scene. Even in each chapter, each scene or subset of each chapter, each time your hero engages with the next beat of storytelling, you're going to be playing with these drives, these motivations. If your hero doesn't have motivation, they're just going to sit there. Now, I've talked in other live streams about the need for a very active hero as opposed to a passive hero. And I just want to point out that if any of you ever struggle with this idea of writing a passive hero, let your ears perk up, because your passive hero is not engaged with the primal human drives that motivate us all to do things. You have to look at this hero and sort of figure out where they fit in this moment of the story. What part of the pyramid, right, is active in them, or what combination of parts of the pyramid are active in them. Let's use some story examples now so that we can make this really concrete and you can really start to relate it to the stories that you're working on. Oh, the other word I wanted to throw in actually was the word stakes. Right. So we have characters motivated to do things, right, because they've got deficiencies. And if they're in the bottom 4 categories of the pyramid, they're operating from a state of trying to alleviate a deficiency. And if self-actualization is the thing that's drawing them forward, then they're just in pursuit of growth. It's not so much a deficiency as a state of becoming, the drive to become all that we can be. So that's that. But stakes have to do with, particularly with deficiency needs. What happens if we don't get them? What happens if we have a deficiency in survival needs and we fail? Like, those are the stakes of a scene. You'll sometimes hear that bandied about, you know, poker players will talk about it. It's like, how much are you going to lose if this goes bad? And so thinking about the nature of those deficiency needs also helps us understand the stakes that are at play at any moment of the storytelling. One of our favorite examples, of course, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I just had the fun of going to see a production of Wicked, the musical, last week while I was having fun with my family, and I was prioritizing love and belongingness over my public work and esteem. So I shifted my needs around, right? I prioritized things a particular way last week. And one of the things that I did with my daughter was to go see a production of Wicked. It was very interesting to think about Wizard of Oz from a different perspective. But our familiar telling of Wizard of Oz, taken from the film, is that we have a farm girl, Dorothy, and what's driving her at the beginning of the film is her need for love and belonging. She's part of a family who are prioritizing survival and safety. They are working so hard to keep this farm going that they don't have time to meet her emotional needs. So right away, you have a crystal clear example of how this hierarchy of needs creates story energy. I hope everybody's following me here. Dorothy wants to play. She's a kid. She wants attention. She wants people to spend time with her, to notice her. Everyone is too busy working. They're trying to keep the farm going. They're involved with survival and safety. She's involved with love and belongingness. Collision, right? So what happens at the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, of course, is that the focus of all of Dorothy's love and belongingness is her little dog Toto. And a neighbor comes and threatens to take Toto away. And so now what's at stake? Now it's Toto's survival that's at stake. And so Dorothy, who's already filled with a deficiency of love and belonging and is wanting to do something to get her needs met. And she even sings a song about it, right? She just wants to go someplace where she can, feel differently, feel better about herself. But now there's a survival issue. So she's got to make sure that this horrible lady doesn't take Toto from her and do something terrible to Toto. So all of a sudden we're back to survival. What are the stakes? It's life and death for Toto. All right. As the story progresses and Dorothy ends up in the land of adventure, her motives revert back to what her core need was at the beginning. She wants to get back home. She wants to return to her family, right? So that deficiency remains really her primary drive. But in order to achieve it, she is confronted again and again and again with threats to her survival. So she's got to deal with that. She's in danger a lot. And you're going to see that survival, it's the base of the pyramid. And it comes up again and again and again in our storytelling. Now, along the way, she explores her need for love and belongingness by making new friends, right? She meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. And at the very end of the tale, in order to truly get home again, she has to sort of sacrifice these new friends in order to go back to her family. So right away, it's an excruciatingly beautiful moment full of story energy, because her need for love and belongingness is colliding with her other need for love and belongingness. She can't stay with her friends in Oz and go home to Kansas. And that's why it's so wonderful. It's why it's such a powerful scene, because you've got these intense drives, these really hardwired human motivations colliding. And I just want to point out one more thing before we move to another example. Dorothy makes the tough decision to prioritize going home to her original family, to her life in Kansas, and seek the love and belongingness there. And so she has to sacrifice the love and belongingness of her new friends in Oz. But what happens in that last moment of the story? The wizard, who, we've already discovered is not such a wonderful wizard after all, but he decides to reward these friends who also have to sacrifice Dorothy, right? They're sacrificing love and belongingness, but he gives them self-actualization as a gift. It's such a great moment, isn't it? He gives each of them, here's the thing that you need to be all that you can be. You lack courage, I'm giving you courage. You lack brains, or at least the confidence that you have brains. I'm giving you a diploma, right? You lack humanity, like your full humanity. He's talking to the Tin Man. He gives him a heart. This is self-actualization. It's such great storytelling. So I just wanted to lay that out because it's so spot on. Now, Jay has already brought up, as you know, one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite books, Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit. And I'm going to show Jay's comment so we can talk about it. So Jay says, Bilbo gives up safety and survival for the sake of self-actualization. Exactly. This is exactly what he does, Jay. Is this the mark of a hero, to sacrifice more basic needs for a higher purpose? Jay, this is so insightful. And this is why I sort of love the resonance of Maslow's work, which is, you know, this is a psychological theory about real humans. But the gifts of a storyteller like Tolkien, you just see like, ah, there we go. It's all there. And Joseph Campbell helps us interpret it and understand it. This sacrifice of Bilbo's not only safety and survival, right? Bilbo gives up some esteem as well. He gives up esteem. In fact, in a way, it's one of the most painful things he gives up, because he is described at the beginning of The Hobbit as being respectable, right? According to what measure? Respectable according to the social mores of the Hobbit world, you know, of his community. And so his sense of belongingness in that that wonderful, you know, little town of like busybody hobbits who are very materialistic, you know, he's not going to belong there anymore, and his reputation is going to be ruined. So he sacrifices esteem. He sacrifices safety. He sacrifices the belongingness of his original community. He sacrifices all of it. And what does he get in exchange? Just as Jay says, he gets self-actualization. And honestly, one of the things that's so moving about The Hobbit and so brilliant about it is that his invitation to adventure, which comes from a mentor figure, Gandalf, knows this from page 1. Right away, it's like, Bilbo, what happened to you? This is not who you truly are. You know, looking at this little contented fellow, you know, blowing smoke rings, and his house is perfect and everything is tidy, and he's got a pantry full of goods. It's almost comical how precisely Tolkien says, nope, his survival needs, no problem. Safety and security and stability. Oh my gosh, hobbits are all about that. That's what Bilbo's all about. Is he a respected member of his community? Yes. He has his love and belongingness. He has his esteem. He has no deficiencies whatsoever. It's so brilliant. His one deficiency is that he's living a lie. He's only half of who he is. And Gandalf comes and says, none of this matters. This isn't who you are. I'm bringing you an adventure, and you're just the man for it, you know? And Bilbo, it takes a while. It takes a tremendous amount of really, you know, A+ storytelling to move Bilbo from where he is at the beginning of the book to where he is 15 pages later, where he's all of a sudden, okay, I'll go. Right. It's sort of an incredible first act. But all he's getting in exchange for sacrificing all of the rest is self-actualization, the possibility. Now, one of the things that's dangled in front of Bilbo is that there are going to be riches. He's going to get his share of the spoils. But we don't really believe, do we, that that's the main reason that he goes. It's not really the main reason that he goes. Gandalf is a very powerful wizard and has stirred up this buried drive for self-actualization in Bilbo. And that's what gets him out the door, in my opinion. You may read it differently. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Jay. I think it's such a brilliant example. Here is another. I just want to get everyone's comments. Very good. Here's another example that you know that I like very much. I'll talk about Jane Eyre for a minute, because what I wanted to show is how this can also serve to be an internal battle. And Jane Eyre is a wonderful novel. And there's this that, you know, takes us through a lot of periods in Jane's life, right? And when we meet her, she's in this family that mistreats her terribly. So her need for loving belonging, it's incredibly deficient. Like, yeah, she kind of has enough to eat, you know, they don't treat her particularly well, but she's got a home. But in order to have the home, she's had to sacrifice love and belonging because they despise her. You know, she gets just little tastes of it from the servants who have a kind of a grudging pity for her. But then she goes on all these different, you know, sort of sections of the book, and she ends up at the school and she makes a friend. She loses the friend who dies. And then she finally ends up in the home of Mr. Rochester, who we sense right away is more than just a love interest, right? He's more than just a love interest. And I hope I'm not spoiling the plot of Jane Eyre for any of you when I reveal that against long odds, the two of them do acknowledge their sense of attraction and almost a sort of predestined fate together. But she then discovers, as they're planning to be married, that Mr. Rochester has a previous wife. And I just want you to look at this incredible moment in the storytelling that is essentially Jane's internal choice. It's her decision. Nobody whisks her away. Those of you who want a clearer understanding of passive versus active hero, pay close attention now. Nobody says, Jane, this is terrible. We've just gotten news that this guy that you're about to marry actually already has a wife. So we're going to take you away from this terrible situation. That's not what happens. Jane gets this information, and now look at the collision of drives within her. If she marries him, if she sort of keeps his terrible secret and marries the man that she truly loves, what does she get? Does she get love and belongingness? Well, she's going to get the man of her dreams. Is she going to get security and survival? Well, he's incredibly wealthy. And this is a character whom we've already been through a lot of survival-based storytelling about. She's you know, barely made it out of the boarding school alive, right? It was sickness going around, and she's an impoverished governess. She has no one. And so she gets survival, she gets safety, she gets love and belonging. And Mr. Rochester's a very, you know, he's a lord of the manor. He's going to get social status. She's going to get all of the things. But what is she not going to have? She's not going to have self-actualization, because she is a person of tremendous moral integrity. She knows that to do this thing would be wrong. It would just be wrong. And she cannot do it because that would be a violation of her true self. And so she bolts. She runs from all of it. And the story energy is incredibly powerful because she has a storm of all of the human drives going on inside her. And she chooses to go for the highest one. You know, as Jay noted, this sort of mark of the hero of being able to deal with the deficiency of the other drives in pursuit of the higher one. And that's what Jane does. And it's just incredible storytelling. There's an incredible scene, one of the most moving and almost difficult scenes to read in another book that I'm very fond of, The Remains of the Day. And it's a scene where our main character, who's this incredibly stuffy, emotionally constrained butler who does his duty out of such a sense of pride. It's what he's got to do. And he's doing his job because there's a very important party going on downstairs in the house of his employer, while upstairs the very same night his own father is on his deathbed. And the housekeeper keeps running down and giving him updates like, he's not doing so well, you know, maybe you better come up. And he can't leave his position. He's the butler. He's just the butler. I say that, but to him, he's the butler. He's the butler of the house. It's a really important position. And so the collision between his belongingness, his emotional attachment with his father, and his sense of his place in society, his role, right? This feeling that he has about what a butler's proper duty is, are an excruciating collision. What does he decide to do? He decides to do his duty and stay downstairs while his father dies upstairs alone. It's an incredibly difficult and beautiful scene. And our heart breaks for the character, because even as he's making this decision and we're saying, no, go upstairs, tend to your dying father, we also understand that he's in an agony of collision of primal human drives. And because of his temperament, that need to be the perfect butler in that moment is really, really overwhelming. And for a different character, it wouldn't mean a thing. They would just, hand the tray to the serving man next to them and say, you cover for me, I have to go upstairs. But for this particular character, because he's so well drawn, we understand his personality and that this collision is excruciating for him. The last example I was going to use, and I promised that I would mention it, my own book, Alice's Farm, and it does harken back a little bit, again, to Jay's point about the mark of a hero, is the main character in Alice's Farm is an Eastern cottontail rabbit, and I go to some pains in the beginning of the book to establish what everybody knows, which is a rabbit is in terms of the food chain out there, it is a pretty defenseless creature. Rabbits are good at running away because that's basically all they've got, but they are prey animals, and pretty much anything that eats meat will eat a rabbit. And so she's vulnerable on a basic level of survival, so much so that all the rabbits kind of incorporate their sense of their own vulnerability and the tenuousness of their survival into their culture, into their way of exchanging greetings and how their warren works. So there's a bit of world building about how the rabbits have incorporated this ongoing sense of their own mortality into the way they think and the way they behave. But when the land that they share with the newly arrived human family who are going to struggle to learn to become farmers is endangered by the new farmers' lack of competence, Alice is able to overrule her own fear for her personal mortality with a larger concern, because if the farmers fail to do what the farmers must do, the whole valley will be plowed over and turned into a parking lot or whatever the other humans have planned for it if the farm fails. And so this is exactly that kind of decision, right? It's the kind of decision where I have survival needs and that's what drives me, but I can see, because I have the gift of the hero, I can see that the self-actualization here might be to sacrifice my personal survival for the survival of all. And that is a true hero's journey. And that is, how that book is structured as well. So this is a super interesting topic. I'm just going to look to the comments to see if anyone's got any particular question. Nancy, great insight. Some of the characters revealed by how they handle the collision of needs. This is right. Motivation and personality. This is what drives characters to take action. And I'm glad you posted this comment, Nancy, because one of the things I wanted to say in conclusion is that my experience is that writers will sometimes come to me with an idea for a story and they will offer some pretty thin broth, at the beginning. They'll say, well, my heroes, okay, they're a little bored. They're kind of restless. Their life is all right, but, maybe they just want something new to happen. And that's where they're coming from. Like, that's the setup. But I don't see anywhere on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like, I'm okay. Like, I'm not that driven to do anything. Like, boredom is not one of the rungs. You might say, right, that self-actualization of thwarted desire for self-actualization might manifest as boredom particularly. But what I implore you to do is to be honest with yourself about what drives human beings. What drives human beings is heavy stuff. It's intense stuff. It's really intense. The need to survive, the need to feel loved, the need to have some status in society, right? The need for stability. What will your characters do for these things if they feel deficient in them? And that need for self-actualization, which is, in a sense, the mark of a hero. Where, particularly in the protagonist, the main character of your story, is the need for self-actualization coming into play, or is it? Now, Maslow said, interestingly, that not everybody in real life achieves self-actualization. It's actually, you know, it's a select few who do the work, who take the journey to that. A lot of people just spend their lives dealing with their deficiency needs. And when something gets deficient, they do what they need to do to top it up, right? And that's a life, and that's a perfectly good life. But for many humans, that glimmer at the top of the pyramid of what it means to self-actualize is a very powerful need, and often to the point where all of the other needs will be put by the wayside, and they will sacrifice even to the point of their own survival, as many a hero has done in a story, but also in real life. Many of the figures from history that we revere as heroes have actually operated according to this. So lots of stuff to think about. But in your own storytelling, really keep these drives in front of you. Don't settle for something, bland. You have so much to draw upon as a storyteller. And I guess the last point that I'll make is that it's not just your characters, of course, who are driven by this stuff, right? Your readers, guess what, are human, and their nervous systems, their psychologies are hardwired to react to this stuff. So when the character that we're loving in the book that we're reading is having a survival issue, we are engaged. When they're having a love and belonging issue, we are engaged, right? We get so engaged. We're rooting for Jane and Mr. Rochester to work it out. We want Bilbo to escape from the spiders. We want him to survive. But then we are also rooting, if our hero is going in that direction, we're really rooting for their self-actualization above all. We don't want Jane to say, okay, all right, Mr. Rochester, we'll get married and we'll just never tell anybody about your wife in the attic. We don't want her to do that. We want her to take the higher path. We want her to choose the road to self-actualization, right? So your readers are also running along these same tracks. And the more you put this stuff into the way you think about your story, the more engaged your readers are going to be. All right, my friends, thank you for sticking around for this discussion. It's such an interesting subject, and I think there's so much practical use to be made of it as you think about your books, the stories you want to tell, the characters that are coming to life in your mind, and the readers that you want to connect with. So I hope this has been of benefit. If you are watching on YouTube and you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. It would be wonderful to have you as a subscriber. And if this content pleased you, give it a thumbs up, because that's very helpful to the channel, to me, and to other writers out there who might be more likely to find this content if you support it in that way. I love having you all here, and I love these conversations. If there's a topic that you want me to talk about in the future, just send it my way. Leave it a comment below the video, and I will respond to it, and I'll get a sense of what is on your mind. All right, my friends, it's great to be back doing the live streams. I missed you all. Happy writing to you, and I will look forward to seeing you next week.